Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I have the pleasure of working on an older reel. Josh sent this one, and this is a Pflueger International 631. It's a large spinning reel designed for saltwater. And I haven't worked on this one before, so Josh said, why don't you work on it for me and do a video. So here we go. We're going to go do just that. Before we get started, please note that I do wear a glove on my hand that keeps the oils and dirts and greases and that out of my non-working hand. I wish I could do that on my working hand, but I just don't have good feel for the screws and tools and the like when I do, but I do try to get that out. I use a plastic container, just the bottom of a milk tray, for parts, and all of my pieces and parts are going to go into that as I work on the reel. I like to test the reel beforehand. This one seems to be working very nicely. I'll check the bail and all. And if your bail is working, you don't need to take the screws out and play with the springs and that. There's only springs underneath there. There's no moving parts. But I do recommend, as you service your bail, just put a little bit of penetrating oil on the focal points, the bail arms, the rollers, and the like. It's probably been a little while. If dirt does build up in there, well, it can slow the performance or inhibit the bail trip. So go ahead and do that and just give it a flip. And that's all you need to do to service a bail. You do not need to take it off. I will repeat that because I get a lot of reels that come into my shop looking for repair because they took the bail off and can't put the screws back on. All right, I'm going to start by just taking off a couple of things. I'm going to take the handle off, take the spool off, and take the side plates off, and we'll look at this. A little bit of a broken knob here, but that doesn't seem to impair performance at all. So the knob should unscrew in a clockwise manner. You can hear a little bit of a complaining going on there. That one hasn't gotten oil in a while either. So we'll just do two things with that penetrating oil as well. We'll put it into the stud up top here and on the seam there, and it'll work its way in and kind of take care of that complaining. Let's get that off my bench for a while. Yeah, I do have a secondary board on my bench. I just like to keep most of it off the bench itself. Over the years, that's kind of been impossible, but it helps. And we're going to take the side plate off. There's 3 side plate screws here. They're stainless screws. That tells you a little bit about the strength and the quality of the reel. This reel being made in Japan. If it was made in Japan, chances are it's the 1970s. And can't wait to see what's inside. While I'm doing that, I want to spend a moment just thanking our first responders and essential personnel. Everybody involved in keeping us safe, all of the folks that are in the uniformed services like police, fire, rescue, EMT, first aid, and the like, and all of the people involved in the essential services, particularly as we're entering the holiday season now, everybody in the transportation and the delivery fields and the like. Thank you for everything it is that you do. All right, three screws hold the side plate on, metal side plate. We've got some accumulation of grease, which means that this reel's been laying around a while. And you can generally find out exactly how it's laying around. You'll see it's in the case and it's there. So that one was stored like this, just kind of laying face down, and gravity has done its work over time. This has no lubricating value at all, sitting in a side plate. So we're going to take this out. And some of the essentials of basic reel repair are just making sure that the reel is appropriately cleaned. You're going to do an examination of all the pieces and parts to make sure that there's nothing worn that will affect the performance of a reel. And once you, if you find one of those pieces, well, the next thing you want to do, of course, is to replace those pieces. That's often the, what I'll call the consumable pieces, drag washers, springs, things like that. But you may find that you need something more than that. You may need a gear that got scarred. If it's a level wind gear, you may need an idler gear, which is a plastic transition piece between the worm gear and the spool most of the time, or the main gear. And you'll just want to make sure that you inspect it, because there's no sense putting worn or bad parts back in. This is a beautifully designed reel. It has a big main gear, so there's quite a gear ratio on this. Has the pinion gear going through the shaft. I'm assuming we got 1 ball bearing. We'll find that out in a moment. We have a big crosswind block full of old grease as well, so we'll take care of that. And you saw me use a cotton swab before. Well, I can also use a screwdriver, whatever works for you. Use a screwdriver. Be careful, of course, if it's plastic parts or something like that. Don't get aggressive with a screwdriver. But you can use a screwdriver as a scraper to get some of that stuff off. What happens is if you leave the old grease in and it's got a lot of dirt in it, well, that dirt becomes abrasive. It becomes like a sandpaper. So you want to get the old greases out of there as best you can, and make sure you fill it with new. Boy, this crosswind block looks like an airplane with the wings raised there. Pretty cool. All right, we'll take the spool off. Now, you don't have to take the spool off. I do because I want to see what's in the drags as well. But we're going to take that spool off before we remove the axle shaft. That part's too big for my my parts tray, but you know what? I'm not going to lose it either putting it there. That's a big piece. Now we'll take those 2 screws out. So if you like this kind of video, if you like to see how fishing reels are made, you want to explore the engineering behind them, you want to understand a little bit about how they work, well, I do a lot of that in the videos that I do. Most of them focus on fishing reel repair. And if you subscribe to my channel, you'll get to select which ones you want to go see. I work on all kinds. This is an older saltwater reel, a big reel. I work on freshwater reels. I work on bait casters, conventional reels, just about every reel. And you'll have an opportunity to learn a little bit about those reels as I try to pass on what I know for other folks. Take those 2 screws out and you can remove the axle shaft. And you can see we have the old dried grease there as well. Right now Chris is mumbling in the background to change the paper towel, so we'll go ahead and do that. And just make sure it's clean. And I didn't feel any kind of resistance at all as I was bringing that axle shaft up through the pinion gear here, which means that it's true, it's not bent or anything, so it won't be inhibiting performance there. Still lots of grease on this, which is why I wear that glove. I'll do most of my work with that, and I'll try to do that as well. Notice that in the back here, there's a little copper shield or brass shield that belongs on the main gear that got stuck in the channel here. Don't lose that. If you lose that piece, most of the time it'll just sit on the main gear here. But if you lose that place, then the performance is going to become erratic because the stud will be way smaller than the slot, and it'll just kind of bounce around a little bit, and your line will wind up a little different. All right, we'll just finish the cleaning on that. Now, if you had tough grease, you could use a penetrating oil like we just used on the bail to kind of help degrease that. And that brings me to a thought. I had one of our viewers kind of wrote in and said how they kind of hose down their reels afterwards. And I mentioned to them, do not use dish soap or those kinds of varieties of cleaners when you're hosing down a reel after use. Those cleaners have detergents in them, and detergents are going to get rid of grease, right? They're degreasers. And if you use that on your reel, some people will tell me, well, I put my reel in a bucket of water and some dish soap in there. Well, that dish soap is going to be a degreaser. It's going to break down the greases and the oils inside your reel, and you're going to be not in good shape. So as a word of caution, use the fresh water rinse. Don't use anything that's got a degreaser in it. This came off in a traditional sense. I used a deep socket because of the ridge on the rotor. Came off in a traditional sense, and we're going to just kind of pull up on that. Now we have a kind of a standard old-time fishing reel here. I don't know who made it. I'm going to put those pieces right in the rotor there. We'll come back to that in a moment. We have 3 screws. Notice the orientation. You have the bail trip ramp heading up towards the piece here, and you have a slot here. So this one is almost impossible to put on the wrong way, but sometimes you're going to find that these are circular in nature with no identifying pieces because the ramp is built into that. And you want to check the orientation on that so that you put it back in a proper orientation when you go to reinstall. I've seen these where it's been flipped 35 degrees or something, and the bail trip doesn't work. It works, but it doesn't work to where you would expect it to work because it's firing at a different point. And a lot of times you'll notice you'll put the bail wire up, that bale wire will stick or it'll become very hard to trip, and that's just because that bale wire is landing at the top of the ramp. It doesn't have any momentum to complete that trip. So if you put it in, for example, if it was over here, you might find that every time you cast, you're sitting on that high spot. Well, I'm thinking now that we don't even have a bearing in here, we probably have a bushing. We should be able to, I'm not sure if we're going to pull this through or push this out. We're going to push this out. All right, so we push this down from below. We've got a washer that belongs on top. I'm going to put that right back on here. And the case is, looks like the case is actually acting as a bushing here. So this is one of those things that if that wears, you're done. You'd have to replace the case. And we should have a washer below here as well, I'm thinking. We do. So don't lose the washer below and the Teflon washer. This is a good place to tell you take pictures, because if you were unfamiliar with that and knock these things to the ground, well, you're going to have a 1 in 3 chance of getting it right. I'm going to put them in the order that they belong in. And I was reminded of that yesterday. I did a video on a Daiwa reel, and I had 1 of 2 handle positions, and of course I was wrong. But the viewers are quick to point that out, and we were able to get it back in the right position that the customer wanted it before we left. All right, I'm just going to pull this out now, and you can see we just have more accumulated grease behind it. When I take those main gears out, I want to set the click ratchet or the anti-reverse dog to the off position. I don't want that to interfere on the way back in. If you leave it in the on position, you won't seat that main gear properly, and sometimes you'll get things disrupted. Here's where I'm going to use that penetrating oil as a cleaner again. There's some accumulated greases on the side plate. We'll go ahead and take care of that as well. So if you have any questions on reel repair, I kind of started this to kind of show everybody what I know, create a legacy, if you will, before I can't do it any further. And I'm always willing to share what I know. If you're working on a reel and you're stuck, if you leave a question in the comment section, it doesn't have to be about this reel. Maybe you're working on a bait caster or something, and you're just plain stuck. You took it apart and maybe you didn't take a picture or something. Maybe you need help in diagnosis. Got that one the other day. A lot of these things I can figure out if I see, but some of these times I can't figure it out as described. And one of the folks sent me a note saying, I got a star drag reel where every time I go to pull the drag out, the star drag travels with it and kind of unwraps. Well, something's clearly wrong in the drag stack, but I can't answer that without seeing what it is. All right, so but I'll try and help you anyway. All right, so I'm going to put some oil on the pivot points for that. I'm going to make sure that that's in the off position. The off position rests against the case, just like that. So I'm going to move it out there at this point. All right, this case is done. We just clean up our main gear, and this is a relatively easy fix. This reel has been cleaned. We saw that the grease had settled to one side, which means it wasn't used for an extended period. We have some dried grease on here, and we have some accumulated grease on here. Now that's not going to affect reel performance because, well, that's not part of the reel cranking, but it needs to be cleaned nonetheless. This is where your click ratchet or your anti-reverse dog is going to rest to stop the main gear and to stop it from backpedaling. So clean out those channels. I'm going to use a small micro driver to do that first, and then I'll spray it down. But clear those out. And yeah, Chris, I didn't change that paper towel, so this one's for you. All right. Inside joke. Alrighty. Now we'll just put some penetrating oil on there. I'm going to use a soft brush. I recommend that you have an assortment of little tools to go by. Do what you're comfortable with. Don't do it just because I'm doing it, but what you're comfortable with. But you can see as you spray it down and you use that soft brush, all that stuff comes right off. We'll do the same thing on this side. Most of that should be able to just be pulled out. There's not a lot of grease remaining in the teeth, which is good because it didn't dry and clog. Let's go ahead and clean that up. And we'll just wipe that down. And now it's just a matter of relubricating this and putting it back together, and then we'll go up top and we'll work on that drag stack there. So remember what I said, the whole bunch about the reel services, just inspecting the parts, making sure they're cleaned, and then that they get re-lubricated during the service. Alright, we're going to use a fishing reel grease. I only recommend fishing reel greases. In this case I'm using Pen grease. I don't really care which grease you use, but make sure it is a fishing reel grease. And there's a lot of fishing reel greases and oils available online, whether you're using Amazon or any of the other services out there. There's plenty of them for you to choose from. Alright, that just gets reseated in here, pushed all the way down. And you could, if you wanted to, you could have put the grease on here first, or you can put it on here second. Doesn't matter much. Get some grease in the teeth so that it rides smoothly. Just like that. Get some on the face as well, because that's where the crosswind block is going to go, and you want to ease the friction there as well. Alright, so remember what we did on this this pinion gear now. This one's the top washer, and that's good because it can't go past there, so it's hard to mess that one up. Then we had the Teflon washer and a metal washer underneath, but I just took those off because I want to do the same thing on the pinion gear that I did on the others. I want to clean out the tracks of those teeth. And you can just tell the difference in reels today and reels from the 70s. The materials are just so much different. And this is solid, I believe it's brass, but it's a nice material. It's a hard gear that, well, they're not going anywhere. You're going to have to crank an awful long time to kind of wreck these. That's what makes these things revered. A lot of folks say, I'd rather fish with the one from the 70s or the 80s that I grew up on than the modern reels. Well, the modern reels have advantages. They're more lightweight, that's for sure. They've come with graphite and other, carbon fiber kind of casings and things like that. And they also have ball bearings, which makes them operate smoother. And some of the alloys that they have now are really quite the rage, if you will. But there's nothing wrong with the standard old reel. We came from below, so we got to go back in from below. And I just noticed that if you try to put those two washers on, you're not going to get it past the teeth. So remember, your Teflon washer went first. That's on the inside. Your metal washer went second. And I guess we're going to do it this way. We're going to line it up upside down so that gravity holds those two pieces. Now you can go back in with the pinion gear and make sure that it seats properly. You can give it a turn if you like. With that in place, then, you can put that washer back on top here. Now, we have the rotor, and I did take care to spray the 3 contact points, but I didn't spray the one inside here, so I'm going to go ahead and spray that, just so that the bail trip lever is going to work fine. Just put that down for a moment. And the best thing to do is just kind of work it in. And if you're happy enough with that, go ahead and put some oil on there as well. Same thing, use real oil. Don't use household oils. They're just not going to hold up in a marine environment. All right, we need that little trip ramp now. Let that stuff work its way in. As I mentioned, you have a notch, so it's kind of hard to mess this one up in terms of positioning. And I'll go to my parts tray for the 3 little screws that belong in there. And if I start dropping these all over the place, well, those of you that watch my channel know what that's all about. And sure enough, true to form, I'll struggle with the first one. Me and the little parts don't get along all the time. It's always the first one. You got to line it and turn it and hold it and all those other things at the same time. But we'll get them in, get them done. Alrighty, that's one down, 2 to go. I'm going to leave that one a little loose because I still want the play to line up the other 2. So Josh sent this reel in because he wanted it repaired. If you have a reel that you would like to have serviced, doesn't have to be broken. This isn't broken. But if you have a reel that wants to be serviced and you're not comfortable doing it yourself, then if you send me an email on my business card that follows you, I'll be happy to provide you with that service and repair information. Work on all kinds of reels, and if I can't work on something, I'll tell you. And interestingly enough, what I mostly tell people on the ones I can't work on, it's not that I can't work on them, they're under warranty. And generally I'll say, well, send it back to the plant, it's in warranty. So a lot of folks ask why I don't work on the newest versions. Well, that's exactly why. If a reel is under warranty, well, if it's got a manufacturing defect, if something broke in the reel, send it back there. I just had a captain on the boat told me that he just bought some jig masters and 2 of them broke within the first week. Well, you know, they don't normally carry cover warranties on commercial use, but hey, come on. That reel should hold up for more than 2 trips, and that could have happened on anybody's boat. I told them send it back. What's the worst they can say? You're a boat captain, we're not going to do it. I'm putting the handle on now so that I can hold the main gear in place. Well, it's a nice smooth turning reel. I'm going to lower that down so that we can get this axle shaft back in. Axle shaft just takes a little bit of grease, a very light amount of grease, because it's going through the pinion gear, and if you put too much on, you're just going to squeeze it out the top here. Let's get that down, get it started anyway. Now I'm going to, okay, once you've started the axle shaft through, go ahead and get that crosswind block. We've put the brass shield on there. In case you didn't remember, this is the way that the orientation goes on that. Now, if you had a question about, gee, how does it go? Well, the first thing you would want to do is go back to your pictures, which I recommend everybody take all the time, because that will show you what the original orientation was. If you put it this way, you're going to bump, and you're not going to get the drag coming down, and the reel won't work properly. So you have to have that seated the right way. Let's line that up then. Bring our axle shaft through. Look for those 2 holes. You want to make sure that they're aligned, and you also need to get the axle shaft through the carrier below. Just like that. And again, me and my small screws here. So if you want to go for a cup of coffee, this may take me a little time to get these in. Or we might get lucky, we never know. Not exactly lucky. There we go. Got the first one. We'll do the same thing here that I did with the other one. Okay, just had a battery pack failure. Wonderful. Let's get that second one in. So it takes about 15 minutes without all the narration for you to take a reel like this, clean it up, examine the pieces and parts, kind of put it back together again. You should do this on an annual basis. I don't care if the reel went fishing twice or 30 or 40 times. It makes a good practice at the end of the season to strip the reel down, clean out the old greases, put the new greases in, and set it aside in storage. And if you're using it year-round, just pick your birthday or something as a way to remind you that it's time to kind of get the reel service, regardless of what the season is. That'll keep the reel fishing for years. Well, this reel shows its age. It's missing a lot of pieces and paint, and that's all kind of flaked out, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't clean what's left of it. You do want to put a little bit of a protective layer on. I use a rod and reel cleaner for that. Just a little squirt onto a kitchen scrubby. This will remove any kind of fish scaling or salt debris or whatever. It's a cleaner and a polisher in one. This one happens to be Penn Reel's rod and reel cleaner. I like it a lot. I use it. I don't endorse products that I don't like. And I'm certainly not paid to endorse them. It would be nice if they sent me a free container of it every now and then, but they don't. Such is life. All right, we'll just clean this up then, and you got a nice shine to what remains to shine on this reel. All right, so the last thing that remains then, we've done all of our cleaning. You just need to go up top here, examine that drag stack, and see what we can do there. So we have this kind of a ripple clamp. It's got a couple of bubbles where you can grab it. It's riding in a track. Just pick one side of that. Pry up and out. Hold your finger on it. It's a spring clip, so you don't want to lose that. That goes into my parts tray. And then you want to take a look at what you have here. And we have a We have a leather washer that's been very well maintained. It's got a lot of oil on it. I don't think we need to do anything other than make sure it's clean. So what you want to do if you have these leather washers is make sure that the metal washers have stayed clean. Alright, so we just want to clean out that channel in there, because these reels take all of the abuse up top, all that wet line coming onto the reel. Well, it splashes off and it lands in this little bowl here, and it seeps under that knob, and the next thing you know, you've got some greening and some debris on those metal parts. So take care to make sure they're clean. Go ahead and use some steel wool or something if you got some corrosion on there. But that's, if you don't take care of that, you leave it as it is, you're going to lose the slip and slide that the design, that the system is designed for. If you find that it's just tarnish, well, you're never going to change the tarnish appeal of it. In this case, you got the brass wearing through the metal. Don't worry too much about that. But if you've got rough spots, then you want to take care to make sure that they all get cleaned. All right, we have the typical 3-in-3 set. This is the first one in, the ripple washer, which goes on the bottom. Then you're going to go in with one of those hard washers. And again, just feel, make sure that there's no grit or sand or anything on them, but you don't need to do much more than that. First of the round washers, it's called a keyed washer. It's got a rectangle in it. Second of these, again, do the same thing, make sure that it's smooth. Then our eared washer, the one with the 2 prongs, goes in next, and they go in the slots. And then the last one of these goes in, our top washer, and then that little ripple clamp again. And again, this is a spring. It's spring loaded, so don't, let's just say respect it, because it will fly if you're not paying much attention there. Hold it down on one side, load it in, make sure that it's in the grooves, which it is. You can reload now. And put the button on. Make sure that we're tight. Josh has got a reel, it's going fishing. All right, and then back it off. I always recommend that if you're not using the reel, back the drag washers off so that they don't compress. If you leave that tight, it's going to act as a vise and it's just going to cramp down on it. Let's give it that try now. Well, that's nice and smooth all by itself, no ball bearings, a beautifully smooth reel. And then of course we set that to the off position when we loaded the main gear. Let's put that to the on position. And let's put that little click in there so everybody that's on the boat with you or everybody that's on the shoreline with you knows you're working a fish. There you go. That's it. Well, of course, we'll give it one more clip here to make sure the reel is working fine, which it is. So, great little reel. I've enjoyed it. Josh, thanks for sending it in for service. So everybody, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.